Obviously, people are enthusiastic about gardening on a snowy day. The big questions. What's the purpose of your garden? What do I want to grow? And how do you start the thing? How many of you already have a garden? Great. So why do you need to know how to plan it? Probably 80% of you have a garden already. Okay. Well, Caitlin, go for it.
All right.
Do you have a handout?
Not for this one, no. This one's just sort of questions. And a lot of people grow their vegetable garden for fresh summer vegetables. Some people grow their vegetable garden to preserve stuff through the fall and the winter. So that's really the first big question you need to ask yourself when you're planning your garden. And planning is really important. It makes the most out of your soil space. It's amazing how much you can get out of a garden when you actually take the time in the spring to plan what you're going to grow and how much of each thing, instead of just buying a whole bunch of stuff and putting it in and then thinking about how you're going to manage everything. If you just take a little bit of time and plan in the spring or now, it really pays off. If you're planning on growing food for the fall and the winter, you need to think about what those foods are and how you're going to deal with them in the fall. There's no point in growing a whole bunch of potatoes if you have nowhere to store them, because they're all going to go to waste. They'll go in the garbage, or they'll get fed to your chickens or put on your compost pile, and it's a waste of your time, garden space. So for fall, winter storage production, you need to think about what the varieties are, how much each plant produces, which is a good thing to research, because some people, for example, can put in way too much zucchini, which is something that's often grown too much of, and one zucchini plant can feed 4 people. So if you go and plant 5 or 6 zucchini plants, you will have more zucchini than you know what to do with, and you'll be giving it to your neighbors and all your friends, and you'll still have lots. So you need to think about how you're going to deal with your food. There's storage foods that can go into a root cellar, like winter squash, potatoes, carrots, beets. Freezing foods like beans, green beans, broccoli, cauliflower. Canning foods like tomatoes, and some people can green beans. And drying foods. You can dry tomatoes, hot peppers, herbs, but plan it, because it really makes a really big difference. If you're growing for fresh summer garden, you'll have to, again, choose what you grow. In terms of tomatoes, for example, there's all different types of tomatoes, and some tomatoes are for canning specifically, and other types of tomatoes are for fresh slicing tomatoes. So if you sit down with your seed catalog, or when you're at the nursery choosing your tomato plants, make sure that you choose the right types of tomatoes, because a tomato just isn't a tomato. I personally grow a bunch of fresh slicing tomatoes, but then I also grow a lot of paste tomatoes, which are canning tomatoes. And if you don't sort of plan that correctly, you can have a whole lot of tomatoes ripe all at once, same as the potatoes, and not know what to do with them, and they'll all go to waste. Choose a variety of things. Variety really makes sure you don't get overloaded during the summer, which is something you sort of think will never happen, but if you have a successful vegetable garden and you didn't choose a variety of things, you'll find that you have so much of one thing and you're sick of it by the end of the week, because you've used up every single recipe you know of for that thing, and none of your friends want any more. So really the answer to the big questions is to plan. Choosing how much of each vegetable to plant takes some thought. It takes sort of, not a lot of thought, but you have to sit down and really research. The information's available out there on how much each plant produces. What else? And then the last thing that I just wanted to touch on was in choosing seed. On seed packages, it's always written how many days till harvest, and that's a really important thing to look at. We grow in a really short growing season up here, so just because the seed's available at the grocery store or in Home Depot doesn't mean you should grow it. Some things take too long to mature up here, and so you'll plant stuff and you won't actually get anything out of the plant. So it's really important to look at that days to harvest number. I live and grow in zone 4. Diane's in 5A because she's slightly south, but we really have about 3 months. Our last frost is sort of the beginning of June, and our first frost is in September. So we only have 3 months to grow, and you have to take that into account. And so because of that, I start a lot of seeds indoors under lights, which if you're into that is a really good thing to do. You'll get a lot more selection if you can pick your seeds out of a seed catalog rather than going to nurseries. And if you're going to do that, I highly recommend Buying a light bank, they're not expensive, from Home Depot, and starting your seeds under lights. Really starting your seeds on a windowsill, it's not quite sufficient in my opinion. Really start them under a light, keep them as close to the light as possible, and raise the light as your seedlings start, and you'll really notice a big, big difference. So that's my 2 cents on that.
If you don't start off with the best possible seeds, you're just diminishing your chances of success. And we want good yields, good tasting vegetables. So my criteria are, first of all, flavor. That's got to be number one. That's why we have a garden, so we have good tasting produce. Yield is important, especially for a commercial grower. It's not so important if you're just doing it for yourself. And also hardiness is absolutely critical, and it becomes more critical as global warming progresses, because I just find the weather is more and more unpredictable. So I'm going to just suggest you look, as an example, look at tomatoes. I use a lot of different seed companies. We requested catalogs from the people that are listed here except Stokes. And Johnny's is the only people that would send us 20 catalogs, which says something for them. If they were in Canada, I would order all my seeds from Johnny's. Their seeds are excellent. So if you look at tomatoes, there's a huge, huge selection. As Caitlin said, you could grow probably hundreds of varieties of tomatoes. It's page 104. We have to keep two things in mind. One thing that's really important in Muskoka is that we have cool nights. Now that's a huge, it's a huge advantage to you if you're growing something like lettuce, but it's not an advantage to you if you're growing peppers. Because if the temperature goes below 10 degrees Celsius in June, the pepper plants, which are just starting into bloom, will drop their blossoms. So I've tried for years to grow peppers out in the open garden without success, just because of that. We'll get nights consistently in June that get too cold. So the other thing I like about Johnny's seed catalogs is they have a huge amount of information. These columns at the beginning of each section, called growing information, tells you just about all you need to know about growing that particular variety of vegetable. Both from seed and transplanting, gives you hints about harvest, tells you how to store the stuff. So look at all those tomatoes. I like the look of that indigo rose, new variety. Catalogs can be totally engrossing because everything new looks wonderful. But look at, it's on page 105, indigo rose, 3616G. Look underneath, it says 75 days. That's the days to maturity. Too slow for me. I wouldn't even try to grow that. Some of my colleagues here might disagree. But anything, I try to pick varieties that have 60 to 65 day maturity dates, and I do start them in the greenhouse. I start the plants in the greenhouse in April. So I'll tell you what I do grow. On page 104, Mountain Magic, 66 days. That was a new variety last year. Tremendously productive, not bad flavor, not excellent like it says, but it is late blight resistant.
Are we getting to keep these catalogs?
These are your catalogs, yes. Thank you to Johnny's. Late blight has become a huge problem in Ontario tomato crops, both commercial and backyard. And this variety definitely is resistant. So flip the page over, 106. There's another late blight variety, Defiant, 70 days. Nice picture there. I picked it last year to trial because it is late blight resistant. It is beautiful looking tomato, very productive, but wow, it's tiny. It's a beefsteak tomato, but it's tiny. My customers bought it, but a lot of people like to see a big beefsteak tomato. So it's a good variety. 70 days is pushing it by my criteria for maturity date, but it did very well. My standby is Valley Girl, 741, and it's a 65-day tomato, but it does get blight, so the later crops of Valley Girl are covered with this awful blight. There is a typo on our planning your garden sheet here. Johnny's, well, you don't need to know it anyway now, but there's a 0 in the phone number that shouldn't be there. It should be 877, 1877. So that's about all I have to say. I will say there's always this pull between heritage varieties. Heritage varieties are wonderful. They've stood the test of time. The big thing is you can save your own seeds. These varieties I've told you about that I grow are all hybrid. When there's an F1 behind the designation of the plant, that means it's a hybrid. You can't save the seeds. So people say to me, well, what will you do when you can't order from Johnny's? And I'll be dead in the water, right? So Sue's going to say a couple of words about heritage. Excuse my voice, I'm getting over a terrible cold.
Hybrids were designed to develop desirable characteristics, like to give tomato darker redness, to give them tougher skins for shipping qualities, to put more peas in the pod and stuff like that. Hybrids lack the reproductive stability that Dianne was talking about. They only grow true to type for one season, and then the offspring produced from the seeds saved would split the traits and lose all the characteristics why you picked the plant in the first place. Hybrids are therefore only viable for a year and must be continually bred by controlled fertilization, taking the pollen of one plant to fertilize the flower of another, and the grower of hybrids buys new seed every year. With heritage or heirloom plants, you save your own seed year after year, and so you won't be reliant on the seed companies. The crop, by natural selection, you select the earliest, tastiest, largest tomato to grow on, and it will adapt to your local growing conditions. It can eventually ripen earlier if you're in a cold season. By growing heirlooms, you grow and keep alive rare and endangered species that have been saved for generations. This genetic diversity is critically important for the survival and security of cultivated plants. By harvesting and eating heirloom crops, you stimulate your senses by lively tastes, variety, amazing colors and shapes. Seeds of Diversity of Canada quotes that, by depending on hybrids, we lose the vast genetic diversity in our crops that allow plant survival and adaptability to change. The traits that are desirable to home or small market gardens may not be important to large commercial growers. For example, pest resistance, shipping quality, tough skins, and all ripening at the same time. And vice versa, the large commercial growers may not put nutrient content, long extended harvesting time, or superior taste on their list of important characteristics. And that's why I tend to favor the heirloom plants.
Are there any pressing questions to this point? Because
how are they identified, the heritage plants, in the catalog?
Yeah, they will be.
in Johnny's catalog and most catalogs now, because the interest is great, there is a section devoted to heirloom varieties. Let me see if I can find. For tomatoes, it's, thank you, page 108. Mm-hmm.
I thought the till or no to till came in later, but it
The what?
My till or not to till handout, I thought it came in later, but it doesn't, so maybe I can slip that in now. I realized it was supposed to go up here, but I didn't talk about it up here.
Well,
We can do it now.
let's put it in, because this part's very short.
Okay.
let's put it in with, before the layout of the garden. It's the last page on your handout here. Only I don't have it. After we've talked for a while and you can't sit any longer, I'm going to show you how to do a germination test, because that's what we're doing right now. Does everybody have these sort of summary pages? So the next thing, point 4, is timing. Timing is everything in a garden or on a farm. And a farm, I don't say that I manage the farm, I say the farm manages me, because timeliness is totally ahead of godliness when it comes to growing things. And the farm manager's job is to recognize when the time is right, because the windows of opportunity tend to be rather small. And if you hit it right, you're great, and if you miss it, you might be great, but you might just lose out. So here's what I do at this time of year. Well, a month ago, take out a calendar. When's the full moon in June? And here it is, 4th of June. The old timers in this district will tell you that the last frost date is the 10th of June. Well, for a gardener, that's really difficult to live with. I want to eat tomatoes in July, not September. So here's what I've come up with. I look for the full moon in June. It's the 4th, so that's pretty close to the 10th. It's the closest full moon to the 10th of June. The one before is the 6th of May. Well, that's way too early. We know there's going to be frost after the 6th of May. Okay, so we have the 4th of June as the last frost date. And Walker Riley told me years ago that the last frost will be the second day after a cold front, close to that full moon in June. Or in May. Like last year, the last frost was in May. The full moon was about the 17th or 18th of May. So I knew that the one in June was too late, would be past the danger of frost. So last year we got a really early start. This year we're not going to get a very early start. Anyway, so the 4th of June,